next presentation is on mitochondrial function and also heart rate variability. And I went to a 3-day workshop that Lilias and Dr. Raja put on over in Orlando. That was excellent. And they video recorded that, and it's I guess available on Mitochondrial Rescue website. I haven't looked at the recording, but not enough hours in the day. But if you like what you hear during the next hour and also what you hear from Dr. Raja tomorrow, then you really should go to that website and learn as much as you can about this technology, because it changes lives sometimes in a very short period of time for the better. But Lilias is a practitioner in the UK, and you may notice that from her speech. She doesn't speak as much like a Brit as I speak like a Texan. So you can tell a person from Texas from their colloquialisms. I'm a fixin'-ta. That means I'm preparing to do something. and others, but anyway, please help me welcome Lilias Amaro.
Well, first of all, I feel enormously privileged to be here because you are all far more learned in the room than I am, and I'm not a doctor. But I was very fortunate to come across this a few years ago, and my practice went absolutely bonkers because of it. And I realized I had to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much to Dr. Cowden, Dr. Sconius, and Anne for enabling me to put this out, because this needs to be put into the hands of as many people as possible, because it changes lives too quickly. So I'm going to very briefly give you a bit of an introduction. We're going to look at some of the concepts of mitochondrial medicine that are around at the moment, and why we insist that people use a VeriCard heart rate variability machine. It is very, very different from what many people are used to. I'll briefly go into the mitochondrial rescue products. The research on our carnosine I'm going to leave for Dr. Raja tomorrow. I'm not going to steal his thunder because it's very, very exciting. And if we've got time, we'll have a look at a few clinical cases. Before I go on to the beginning of heart rate variability, I just want to give you a little bit of an understanding of how it is I'm standing here today, because if you told me this 3 years ago, I'd have laughed you out of the room. I had a practice in Harley Street, which I went to every 2 weeks. I had a practice in Somerset, which is where I live, which is about 3 hours south of London. And I felt I was doing pretty good. And then a friend of mine said, hey, I've come across this mitochondrial stuff. You really ought to listen to it. It does this and this and this and this. And my antenna's going and going, this is too good to be true. So I parked it. And then he came back to me, and this is a man I actually really respect a lot. And he said, Lilias, you haven't come back to me. You really need to look at this, and your son needs it. Now I have a son who I've nearly recovered from autism. He's now 20 years of age. At the time he was 16. Body's doing pretty good, but very mentally globally delayed. So finally I went to see this guy, and he ran me through this heart rate variability, which showed me how much power have I got, where is it going, and what is it doing. And we did the same thing for my son, and I suddenly saw, and he said, the reason why your son is not really happening upstairs is because there's no power going up there. And when we started to use the supplementation, his lights started turning on, and his cognition started changing, and I'm going, oh my goodness, because this is happening in about 6 or 8 weeks. So then I started giving it to my patients, and my chronic fatigue people were moving, and my fibromyalgia people were moving, and my cardiovascular people who couldn't walk upstairs were now walking upstairs, and they didn't have arrhythmias. And this was all happening really, really quickly. And within a space of 2 years, apart from having a practice in London and in Somerset, I had another practice in London which was purely for autistics. I had a practice 3 hours north of London in Cheshire. I had a practice in Scotland, which I had to go on a sleeper train to get to every few weeks. I had another practice an hour away from home, and I spent more time on trains carrying a massive rucksack full of supplements. And I just thought, this can't go on. So Mitochondrial Rescue was born. And I set out on a mission to put this into the hands of as many people as we possibly could. And here we are today. So thank you again, Dr. Cowden, and everybody for making that possible. So, heart rate variability. We need to look at where this came from. And every single one of you in this room who is a doctor or a practitioner of some sort owes a massive debt of gratitude, although you may not have realized it, to this man. This is Vasily Vasilyevich Parin. He is basically the father of space medicine. And he had a very glittering career. 1925, he received his doctorate degree in University of Perm. 1939, doctorate of physiology. 1941, he became the first Moscow Medical Institute director. 1942, we're now moving up into politics. He's the appointed the USSR Deputy Commissioner of Health. And then he becomes the first Secretary General of the USSR Academy of Medicine. Now, yes, it's a glittering career. How does it equate to you? Well, it doesn't quite at this point, apart from the fact he basically disagreed with Stalin, which was a very foolish thing to do at the time. Stalin, unlike Hitler, wanted to create a super race of Russians, and they were going to be super fit and super strong and conquer the world. And Vasily Vasilyevich Parin went, I don't think this is really ethical. And so he threw him in the gulag for 5 years to break up rocks. How you can do that to somebody who's quite so brilliant still escapes me. But anyhow, he got thrown in the Siberian gulag. He survived it. Stalin got deposed. And then in 1953, he was released. They realized they had a very brilliant man languishing there. He was given a new suit, the keys to his old office, and told to crack on. And then basically, in 1956 to 1971 is where it all starts to relate to all of us, because he became the man responsible for all medical aspects of manned flights into space. And this is where heart rate variability starts. And they started with very, very primitive ideas of how they were going to measure the body. And sadly, he died in 1971. But remember, many of us in this room are in our, late 50s, 1960s. So this equates to all of us. So one, it was his brilliance. But two, it was the courage of this man here. This is Yuri Gagarin, the first man to orbit the Earth. It took 108 minutes. And if you can see around his chest, just here, this was measuring respiration. It's a bicycle tube filled with coal dust so that they could measure what was going on. So this starting of measuring the human body was incredibly primitive. Everything he did in space was measured on 2 ECG leads, and that's how it all started. Now, Yuri Gagarin, this is his pre-flight checks. His heartbeat was a remarkable 68 beats a minute, which is absolutely extraordinary. When he went up into space, he went through the most extraordinary G-forces, and all of it was recorded the whole time. And this is where heart rate variability started. So we're talking 1961 is where a lot of the understanding of the autonomic nervous system, a lot of the cardiovascular system, how it adapts to stress, came from the courageousness of this man. When he was in the flight capsule about to be launched into space, he knew that 12 out of the 24 previous missions had not survived. And at that point, he was sitting on 120 tons of liquid kerosene. So an incredibly brave man. So basically linking it all together, and this is what's really, really important. So after Parin died, he handed his legacy to the most extraordinary man called Professor Roman Bayevsky, who is this gentleman here. This is Parin, this is Bayevsky, this is Yuri Gagarin. And basically, Roman Bayevsky went on to create hundreds and hundreds of papers on heart rate variability. And he was the man who really started to pull it all together. Bayevsky had to have somebody who had the technology and who understood software, because he was sort of the medical man. And that guy was Yuri Nikolaevich Semenov, who is alive today, who we have visited, and he basically started the more modern heart rate variability out of all of that research, which we're talking about 50 years of extraordinary research and looking at the studying of all of these guys and the animals and everything that went up into space. And they are responsible for creating the Varicard 2.52, which is what we use today. So one of the things that is really, really important and sets our machine apart from everybody else's is bandwidth. Before I get into that, how many of you do not know anything about heart rate variability? You don't. Okay. Very simply, it is what it says on the tin. The more variability you have in the heart rate, the healthier you are. And if we're looking at, these are your R peaks, we're looking at the time between them. The higher your R peak, the longer the interval. And we want there to be a nice curvy, wavy line showing lots of adaptability. So, if you take a Fitbit, or you take an Oura Ring, which I'm sure many of you have used, they measure the information between the R peaks. That's all they're measuring. They're not measuring the QRS. If you've got a reasonable heart rate variability machine, and I'm sure many of you have got them in your offices, what you're measuring is per second information going through your R peaks across and then to the next one. But the amount of data that you're getting is between 70 and 300 bits of information a second. And that is what gives you your heart rate variability on most machines. Now let me introduce you to something that's come out of the Russian space program that has got 30 or 40 years of extraordinary science behind it. The Varicard measures information at about 16,000 bits of information compressed down to 2,000 bits of information a second. It's a completely different ball game. So when I test and do heart rate variability, we tested all of this out to start with. So we test somebody on one machine for 5 minutes, and then we test them on the other machine. So say the first machine was not a Varicard, it would say their health's not too great, they need to make some changes, there's a fair bit of stress in the body, and they kind of need to pay attention. I test them on the Varicard, it basically says they're at risk of a heart attack or a stroke, and the amount of information is very, very different. The other thing with the heart rate variability that we use, it's a one-page report. We're not going through 6 pages of pretty pictures, about your meridians and chakras, which is very nice, but actually we're into saving lives here. And that energetic information is very, very important, but when you're trying to save somebody's life, sometimes we need to deal with things right now. No disrespect to your work. Emotions are incredibly important, and we are very aware that when somebody does a test, we want them to be in a neutral place. If they've just come in and shouted at a driver, their kids have done something heinous, then we'd like to tell them to go and walk around for half an hour to calm down, because they're not going to get the best test, and we want everybody to have the best test possible so we can really see what's going on. So that's half the information. So my practice went bonkers. One, because I was able to measure very, very accurately how much power has somebody got, where is it going, and what is it doing. And so for particularly, what we found with most people who are really sick is they had no power. So if you're looking at a chronic fatigue or a fibromyalgia person, they may have been ill for a decade or more, you can see that they simply do not have the resources to get better. And they're not able to see the supplements that are coming through because the body hasn't got the energy to do so. If you're looking at somebody who, let's take an autistic, they're maybe not talking, the lights aren't on, they appear to be in la-la land. Well, yes, because there's no power going to the brain. And so all of these parents who are desperately trying to recover their children, we need to get power upstairs. And with the supplementation that we were able to come across at the same time as this, we're able to move that power into other places in the body so we can rescue people. So, the other half of the equation are the supplements, and these are they. Now, The Russians wanted to be the first people to put a man on Mars because you clever guys beat them in getting to the moon. So they went, okay, we're pretty good at long distance or long duration space flight, let's have a go there, but there's a problem. And the problem is a cosmonaut will age 8 times faster for every year he spent on Earth. And so a cosmonaut to do that journey has to be between 35 and 40 years of age. And the trip to Mars takes a year to fly there and a year to come back again. And in that time, they're going to age between 20 and 40 years. So they might have the faculties to get to Mars, but the likelihood of them driving the rocket and steering it home again is unlikely. So they had to work out, how can we enable the body to age, to regenerate faster than the cosmic radiation would have the body degenerating? And it took them nearly 20 years. The first aspect was they found out that the body needs carnosine. And the human body needs 300 milligrams of carnosine per kilo of body weight every 2 hours to keep your mitochondria at its optimum. So let me put that in American speak. If you had a 160 odd pound chap, guy in American, chap's very British,
A little bit more than that.
then he would need about 500 over-the-counter capsules of carnosine every 2 hours. So you could not stick 4 cosmonauts in a rocket with 3,000 capsules a day and go, crack on, chaps, see you in 2 years. It would be an impossibility. And by the way, the rocket following's got all the water and the capsules in. So they had to work out, how can we find a way to potentize carnosine so that it stays in the body long enough to regenerate them faster than the degeneration of the cosmic travel would have on them. And that's what took them nearly 15 years. How are they going to potentize it? And they did. You see, the trouble is, the carnosine you get over the counter stays in the body for 2 hours. And we need it to stay in the body for 12. And so the carnosine that they created does exactly that. 2 or 3 in the morning and 2 or 3 at the end of the day will enable it to stay in the body for 12 hours. Now, it will be in your blood system in 20 minutes. So if I do a heart rate variability and I see somebody is at risk right now, and they've got 4 numbers that say heart attack, I can crack open a bottle, say, here, swallow these, don't move your butt off that chair, and they will, in 20 minutes, they are most likely to be totally protected from a cardiac event. It's that powerful. And so basically, here you've got pure L-carnosine, here is the carnosine extra. It's the most amazing thing. And essentially, in a nutshell, it gives your body the ability to regenerate faster than your years of age would normally allow. I'm 56 years of age. I've been taking it for 3 years, maybe. And I actually now look younger than photographs that were taken of me 2 years ago. I also do about 95 to 105 hours a week. I have done since September, and it's not a problem. I run circles around people who are 20 and 30 years younger than me. It's, there's no way I could do what I'm doing now if I wasn't scoffing this stuff, and I love it. Right, so these are the headlines. Why does it make such a huge difference? Well, I've given you a few clues, but this is probably one of the biggest reasons. So all of your people who've got chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, or who've been ill forever, or they're telling you they're tired, the carnosine is going to go in very quickly, and it's going to repair all protein structures in the body. The next thing it's going to do, in about 4 to 6 weeks, it's going to clean out all the receptors, it's going to resensitize them, and it's going to encourage a much greater production of ATP. That's why your chronic fatigues and your fibromyalgias are suddenly getting off the sofa and going, oh, I could change the sheets, I can lay the table, I can empty the dishwasher, I can go for a walk with the dog. This is the reason. And you can go through all the science with your patients and it'll probably go over the top of their heads. But if you explain to them what a receptor is and how the fact that the receptors, if they're blocked, broken, and damaged, their body can't see that they're ill, then they get this. One of the most remarkable cases I had a couple of years ago, a very wonderful doctor who lived near to me, he's now in Switzerland. I said, hey, Tim, you've got to come and have a go on my machine. I know you're not well, you've got to come over. And he went, yeah, I'm busy. Go away, little girl, you're not a doctor. I know him very well, so it's fine. 3 months later, he rang me and said, hey, Lilias, have you still got that fantastic machine of yours? I went, yep. He said, I'd love to come on. I went, fantastic. Tim, when do you want to come over? He said, today. I said, Tim, what's the hurry? He said, all right, I was diagnosed with full-on lung cancer yesterday. PET scans, the hot bloods, the whole 9 yards. It's not pretty. I know what your machine does. I'd really like to have a look at what's going on. Come. We tested him, and he came in on our scale. 1 is perfect, 10 is horrible, at a perfect 1. As far as the machine was concerned, or his readings were concerned, he was so damn healthy he can go to Mars and back. But we knew he had full PET scans. Now, mercifully, he was a doctor, so he understood what he was looking at. He said, my body doesn't know it's got cancer. I said, it hasn't got a clue it's got cancer. He said, I knew I was bad. I didn't know I was that bad. He said, what am I going to do? I said, it's not a problem. It's going to thoroughly know it's got cancer in 4 weeks. I said, take a couple of pots of this carnosine, scoff the lot, and come back in 4 weeks' time. He came back in 4 weeks' time. Now he's a 9. Horrible number, but we're both rejoicing, because suddenly his body has gone, oh my goodness, I didn't realize we're in this pickle. Right, you fix this, patch this, oil this, repair this, and get after it. He's now alive and well today. He's had the surgery. He is fully recovered. But had we not woken his body up and told it it had a problem, he would be dead today. This stuff is really, really powerful, and it saves lives. And when you learn to read the tests, how they work, then basically you can see these things, and you can head them off very quickly in many cases. So, how many of you have had been tested by me today? Okay, so quite a few of you have got reports. Can you kind of all position yourselves where you can see a report? Because I'm going to go through how you read a report, and I've got 10 copies here of somebody who's in pretty good order to people to look at, so you've got something to look at whilst I'm going through this, because it makes a lot more sense if people can see. So I'm going to go through all of the graphs on the report. In fact, Adam, can I have one of those back so I can look at the whole thing as a whole? I know where I'm at. So you understand when we get to test all of you what you're looking at. So one of the things that the guys in space had to do was to find a very, very quick way of seeing how their chaps in space were. And this was, it's a traffic light system essentially, and it's incredibly informative. So this took years to create. It's very simple, but the mathematical equations that go on behind this, I wouldn't even begin to understand. And it is still being updated today. So 1, 2, 3, the body is in balance. 4, 5, and I'm putting this in very simple terms because I'm not a doctor, but 4, 5, for me, is like everyday stress. You're taking energy away from various organs, away from various systems in your body, but you have enough downtime to recover. 6, 7, the body cannot adapt to the stress that it is under because you keep stealing energy from various other organs in the body and various systems. You don't have enough downtime, and so now you're creating labels. 8, 9, 10, Houston, we have a problem. The body simply can no longer adapt. It doesn't have the power to adapt because you've had to get through 6 and 7 to get there. You've now probably created some physiology. You are at risk of a heart attack and you are at risk of stroke. Now, let me put this into context. You cannot look at somebody who sits in front of you and goes, I'm fine. I've had these people sitting in front of me, and when I do a test on them, I've had 4 numbers that say you are at risk of an imminent heart attack right now. And they tell me they're fine. Now, a doctor who I had a case just like that, I had 4 numbers of heart attack on the heart rate variability. And I hadn't seen 4 before, and the numbers were horrific. So I showed it to a doctor friend of mine and said, hey, what do you think about this? And his first comment, in fact, there were 2 doctors standing together who understood the system. They just looked at me and in unison said, is this man still alive? I went, yes, he is. And they told me of 2 cases. When they get a case like that, they always send them to a hospital. One of their cases, he was sent to a hospital, and basically they checked him out, and he had a fatal heart attack on the steps of the hospital because they sent him off and said, you're fine. And this is the difference between hospital equipment and this. We have much greater bandwidth. The second guy, months, years later, similar thing. They sent him to the hospital, horrible numbers, you need to get checked out now. They gave him a whole load of carnosine. He may have gone a couple of days later. And he died 3 days later. There is no such thing as a practice run with this machine. If it says that there's something seriously going on, you need to pay attention because it's real. So, quick look at that. You've got a pretty good idea of what's going on. Now, if you get somebody coming in 1, 2, or 3, or occasionally 4, they should be pretty healthy, able to get up in the morning, everything's fantastic. But when they've got a list as long as your arm of problems, you know you've got receptor damage. So you are going to be the best Christmas present they've ever had, because you're going to be the one doctor that turns around and goes, I know why you're not healing. Your body has got no idea what's going on, but we're going to fix that in about 4 to 6 weeks. So for all of those people who go from doctor to doctor to doctor and have blood test after blood test and nothing changes and their body can't see the supplements, if they're coming in 1, 2, or 3 and occasionally 4 and they're not what they should be, then you think receptors. It's very valuable. So you now have your ECG lead. So when we've got that on the chart, it's literally just showing you this is, we can choose leads, and we always choose the best lead with the highest R peaks. So this is just a snapshot of the lead that was chosen. Your cardiovelogram is basically showing you all the intervals and the ratio of intervals between your heartbeats. And it's the duration between beats. Now what we want is good undulating peaks and troughs here. So we know that there is good variability in this reading, and it is as simple as that. There's nothing too exciting there. So, histogram. This, if you go back to here, can you see we've got quite a lot that are very high, and we've got quite a lot that are very, very low. So this is showing you the ratio of beats spread across some columns. We want people to be in the center here. We want it to be a nice big green Christmas tree, and this is slightly over to the right here, suggesting that the heartbeat is a little slower. So, and there is a bit of ratio here, but I'd like to have about 4 steps up to the right and 4 steps down to the left, and ideally to be in the center. So that just shows you the ratio of heartbeats intervals. So, spectral function. This, I love this because basically people are visual. They don't like numbers and things like that. So the heart rate variability is divided over a certain area. How much power have you got? Where is it going? And what is it doing? So this is the what is it doing bit. So basically the blue section here is the parasympathetic. So we can see there's not a lot of power going on here. The red area, which is quite active, is your sympathetic. And the green is the VLF. It's your limbic system, and it's the amount of power that is for speech, language, communication, and all of those areas. Now, there's a little black line over here. We ignore that. That is for people who are far more brilliant than I, who do 24-hour heart rate variability, and a 5-minute snapshot is not really enough. So this is very much how much power is committed to a certain area. And so you can see if this person is very, very low in the parasympathetic, their ability to sleep and rest and digest probably isn't working very well. So basically we can change that by giving them a little bit more power. and enabling life to be a little different, which is what we want. Okay, not everybody understands their autonomic nervous system very well. You all being doctors are very brilliant. I treat a lot of people who are not doctors, so I tend to divide it into these areas. And people can, you know, if you've got somebody walking into a room, it's very nice to be able to look at them. You can kind of guess where they're at just by looking at how they're presenting. But this is just a very simple way of looking at it. Now, this is something that I found very interesting. And when you're doing heart rate variability, it's about time. How long does a signal take to be measured? So the parasympathetic is all about what's going from the head to the heart. It's a very short distance, and so it's about 2 to 8 seconds. And this is the reason why we do heart rate variability for 5 minutes, so we can get a measurement across the board. So head to heart, you're allowing parasympathetic 2 to 8 seconds. So for the sympathetic area, you've got head, heart, across the lungs. So that takes 2 to about 30 seconds. So it's a lot further distance it's got to go. And then if you're looking at the VLF, your limbic system, your vagus nerve, anabolic hormones, it's got to go from the head, across the chest, all the way down, possibly to your big toe, and back again. So this is why we really want to get a 5-minute reading on people. Now, I do this with autistic children. Trying to get them to sit still for 5 minutes is interesting. And bribery has its place, and you learn all sorts of tips and tricks. And it's quite interesting, because sometimes a lot of parents go, it's all right, he's autistic. So the kid's never been told no. He's never been given boundaries. So when somebody's slightly school-marmish with them and goes, actually, young man, you will sit still, they do. And so there are times when I'm sweetness and light and charming, there are times when I can be quite school-marmish. I also find having an egg timer very, very useful. Because with an autistic, the shortest time that you can do a heart rate variability reading for is 2 minutes. So I have this enormous yellow egg timer that's 3 minutes. But I tell the children it's 2, because I guarantee you when they can see the last bit of sand going through and they think they're nearly over, they're going to start moving. This equipment is so sensitive, they absolutely can't move, so they have to play the best statues that they've ever played in a playground. So if I make it 3 seconds, I know that I'm probably going to get a good 2.5 minutes without them suddenly moving and throwing the whole thing off. So yes, persuasion is everything at times. So in the center of your chart, you have general parameters. So as a practitioner, this is what people tend to go through with their clients. And I will whip through a lot of this because you're all far more brilliant than I. So you all understand bradycardia, normocardia, and tachycardia. The SDNN is basically relating to how they within balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And this is where the numbers start to get fun. When they come in above where they should, we have to make alterations to the bottom total power figure. So if they're really super stressed and they're coming in at over 100, this is our first marker for a heart attack. And something we pay very, very close attention to. So it's something that we have a various list of numbers that we go through. So basically, if it's very high, they are in the parasympathetic. If it's very low, they are sympathetic dominant. And we take 1 point off the total power if it is above 100, because it basically, although the power at the bottom may seem very big, the stress that they are under means they simply don't have that power to offer. Next, we have the CV, which is the coefficient variation. This is actually the same as the SDNN. It is a percentage of the one above. But again, it's one we watch very carefully. It's just a percentage of the SDNN. Okay, what's the big deal? But when that percentage gets above a certain number, we know that they are at risk of a stroke. And we take that very, very seriously. We can do a lot with stroke. It's a subject for another day, but we are actually able to heal the tissues around the stroke area, which wouldn't normally necessarily have healed. The stress index is a measurement of sympathetic tension, and what you're looking at is the communication between cells. And so it's a bit like if you're towing a car, if there is an even distribution between the front car and the back car, you can make the corrections in the road and it's not a problem. But if the front car is a Mini, keep it British, and the back car, is something really huge, you're going to struggle to make those corrections. And this is a body really fighting to, get with the program and sort things out, but it is really, really struggling. Conversely, when it is too low, the body is in complete overwhelm, the signals aren't getting through, and the stress index is probably one of the hardest things to move, particularly in autistic children. It takes a long time. And people go, it hasn't moved, or it's only moved a bit. Well, it takes time for the body to release the stress. And again, this is where the emotional work has a really, really big role to play. Again, if the stress index is below the parameters, so the lowest we want it to be is 70, but if it's actually below 50, we take another number off the total power. So you can have somebody who's got a stress index that's completely out of whack and too high, and a SDNN that's in completely the wrong direction, and you're going to take two numbers off the total power. So now their 2,000 power, or whatever the number was, can come down to 2 or 3 digits, which is a real measurement of how much that body is really, really struggling. And yeah, so again, as I've covered that, okay. Index of centralization is the hypothalamus. Very few heart rate variability machines measure the hypothalamus. And so in simple terms, for me, the hypothalamus, I just say to people, we're looking at the grand conductor. It's your drive, it's your motivation. Anybody who's depressed will have absolutely no power in this area at all. And it's a measurement of how much the brain is basically going, we're going to fix this, patch this, oil this, repair that, and all the emotional stuff it's got to sort out. So when the brain's on fire, you generally know they've got an awful long list of things they've got to sort out, all those emotions out here. So again, it's a very, very interesting thing to look at. People who are running businesses will quite often have an index of centralization that's very, very high. People who are very, very stressed. So it's very valuable. IRSA is the traffic light system. So that lovely graph, which was green, yellow, and red, is the IRSA. So we know roughly what their function is, and it's very valuable. And you'll find if you choose to train and do this, a lot of your patients will go, what number were you? And I try and, I work with a lot of autistic parents, and they insist on putting their child's chart onto Facebook, and then they, you've got 1 or 2 parents who think they know everything, and so then start giving other people advice, and it's sort of the bane of my life. But watch out for that. Everybody gets attached to the traffic light system, and it's one aspect of about 9 or 10 different features, and it's not just about that one area, although it's a good indicator of where people are. So going down, arrhythmias. One of the reasons I love this work so much is because the carnosine can make an impact on the arrhythmias within hours, and I have a case study which I will show you a bit later on for that. But the impact that you will have on a lot of heart cases, particularly if you've got people who've got AFib, you'll find that the AFib will come down. You may not get them out of it, but what you will stop them from doing is continuing to damage their heart, so because the heart is so much more protected. So the scattergram, which is the right-hand image, we want the heartbeats to be in the sphere. If they're out of the sphere and they're too high, it's generally because the heart is rather slow, or if it's too fast, it will be at the bottom. But the reason for arrhythmias is generally compensation for low cellular oxygen. In other words, the heart is sticking an extra heartbeat in to go, I'm going to stick an extra one in here to give you an extra hand. And so you can see by the amount of arrhythmias just how much strain the body is under. But you can also see, and I love this so much, within about 3 or 4 weeks, it can all change a lot. So there's also on the bottom of the chart, underneath where it says conclusion, if somebody has got more than 4% arrhythmias, a little line will come up and you can't get rid of it that basically says, you have more than 4% arrhythmias, you should go and see a cardiologist. And no disrespect to any of the cardiologists in the room, but the Carnosine Extra can probably do more about those arrhythmias than they can. Right. So, HF is, as you are all aware, I'm sure, you're parasympathetic. It's regeneration, resting, digesting, and healing. And when you've got that, you're looking at, on the chart, you'll see there is a percent, if anybody's got my one there, but whatever the number is in that of the value of that person, that is the percentage of power they've got going in that direction. So if you've got mine up, I've got 32% of my 1800 power is going towards my ability to rest, digest, and heal. So if you've got LF, you're looking at how much power is going to the sympathetic, how much power is committed to the cellular oxygen. Now, if the body is under strain, and this is again where this stuff comes into its own, it's always going to go heart rate and respiration first, because that's what's going to make you survive. So anybody who's really ill, if you see the LF being high, you know the body is saying, forget everything else, forget the digestion, forget the hormones, forget everything. All money has got to be heart rate and respiration. So you can immediately impact that person by giving them more power. And if you give them more power, then there's more jam to spread around. So then your parasympathetic is going to get a bit more power, your VLF is going to get a bit more power, and they have the opportunity to heal. And it's very, very powerful. So the VLF is the limbic system, it's your speech, your language, your demeanor, your vagus nerve, and it's the amount of power that is committed to those areas. Now, if you have, I had a Cambridge University politics professor who came to see me, and she had 52% of her power at any time she ever visited me in the VLF. She couldn't tie shoelaces to save her life because she was so brain orientated. All of her power pretty much always went to the brain, which is why she was a Cambridge University professor. Conversely, you'll have somebody who's a business person who's really tired, who's got complete brain fog, and they may have 8 or 9% going into the brain. Why? Because the stress on their system is so much that it's going towards heart rate and respiration. It's going towards the sympathetic. So when you give the power, you can pretty much influence where it's going to go if you know what you're doing, and you learn how to adjust the dose to do that. So for your brain fog people, for your people who are working really, really hard, literally it can happen in days, and I'm sure Dr. Raja has 1 or 2 cases he'll tell you about that, where people have had brain fog literally all their lives, and with a week the clouds disappear. It's very, very exciting. Now, if you've got children, you're autistics, and they're not speaking, and they're in la-la land, they may have 1, 2, or 3% going into their brains. And the poor parents have been trying everything to try and get those children to speak, they just want to hear that first sound, mum. They've never heard it before. And with this stuff, you have the ability, not with everybody, but with some of them, to make that dream come true. I'm getting emotional now. But it's very, very powerful. And it changes lives. And when you change the life of a family with an autistic kid, they've never heard them speak, or they've never slept, and it can happen within weeks, you've just changed the entire dynamics of the entire family. It's massive. So, total power. This is the body's total power and output per heartbeat as assessed by the Vericard. So basically, this is the total sum power that they've got. Now, most humans, unless you're an athlete, and you're pretty healthy, you should have at least 1,500 to 2,000 power. if you're looking after yourself. The majority of people who will come to you have a tremendous amount less than that. And when you give the body the power it needs, then all sorts of things can happen. Now, I'm going to quickly tell you about old paradigm versus new paradigm. I have literally, I've been very fortunate. I've come through the School of Knox. I have studied relentlessly for 20 years, and I kind of thought I got a good handle on stuff. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I had to throw the whole lot out the window. Because it's not about labels any longer. When people come and visit you, they say, I've got a heart problem, a liver problem, a kidney problem. And, for most physicians and practitioners, they will give them a supplement, a pill, some acupuncture, some homeopathy, whatever is their flavor. And if they're half decent, that area is going to get better within a few weeks or a month or so. And when those people feel they've got their game back and they're on it, they're going to stop taking it. And guess what? In 2 or 3 months, they're going to go back to square one. Why? Because you treated a symptom. The body never had enough power in the first place to run that area. So you just propped it up. And then they took the proper way because they decided they got the mojo back. So if you just give the body the power it needs, it will surprise you, and it will heal mostly, the area in question and a whole load of other things. Now, one of the things they discovered in space. Do you remember being 16? You were all invincible. You partied, you drank. Some of you may have done some other naughty things. And you knew everything. Nobody could correct you. When you got to 26, the relatives all started to say, they were such a wild child, they're so much nicer to be around now, they've calmed down. Well, why did you calm down? Because at 26, the body no longer is able to create the carnosine in your body than it did at 16. At 16, you create more carnosine in your body than you will ever create again in your life. And at 26, it starts to drop off a cliff. And at 30, you think, you're mature, you're having babies, you're getting married, you've got mortgages. No, I'm sorry, you're just aging. At 40, everybody tells you they get tired. You're getting closer to that number 50. At 50, everything changes. You have less than half the carnosine in your body at 50 than you did at 16. And this is when the big diseases come in, because you no longer have the power to say, you can't come in here. And this is why at 50 and plus, we start to break down, we start to degenerate, we start to complain of aches and moans, and we don't want to, go out and party. And we say, run along, young things, you go and have fun. I don't accept that, nor am I prepared to. So why not take something that will regenerate your body at a level that is beyond your years of age? You don't have to do this. You can reach the 50s and carry straight on. I can't stop you aging, but my goodness, I can slow it down, and I'm living proof of it. Right, so I digress. You all know what normocardia and tachycardia is. I don't need to go through that. So we're now looking at the bottom left-hand corner of the chart at the estimation of regulatory systems. Now, patients don't tend to spend a lot of time looking at this, but they are going to look at the middle box and go, where do all the stars come from? So your normocardia, if you've got a heart rate that's higher or lower than it should be, you're going to get a star in the central general parameters box, and that's where that comes from. So the regulatory stability from SDNN, gosh, it all sounds very complicated. Basically, what you're looking at is what is the figure in the SDNN? Is it as it should be? So have you got a normal heart rhythm? If it's not, so if your SDNN is too high or too low, you're going to get a star, and that's where it comes from. So too little, lack of adaptation and flexibility; too much, lack of corrective response. And that just explains the stars there. So also the next one down in that left-hand box is the vegetative homeostasis. This comes from the stress index. So basically, if it is correct, you will have no stars in that area. If it is incorrect, shows an imbalance between a sympathetic, your reactive response, fight or flight, or your parasympathetic. But again, you're going to get stars in the central box, and this is where it comes from. So the activity of sympathetic cardiovascular system is from, guess what, the sympathetic area. So it shows the degree to which the autonomic nervous system is prioritizing cellular oxygen supply over anything else. Anybody who is majorly understressed, who's really tired, is going to have a much higher amount of energy in this area, and you're likely to see either 2 stars or 1 star saying they're way too high or way too low. Either way, that body's under stress and needs to be addressed. So this is the centralization of control. This is, again, comes from your index of centralization. It shows the level of involvement that the limbic system has over and the hypothalamus as to what's going on. So if it's too low, you're looking at exhaustion, burnout, and you'll see that in a lot of people. And if it's too high, it can indicate exhaustion or hyperfunction. Now, athletes completely do different things because they're used to stressing their bodies out. It gets used to all the stress, and so there's a whole different set of parameters for them. So, scattergram. I love this because, again, it's very visual. You can see that this person their heart rate is a little slow. Some people naturally run slow, and it's not a problem. And but the idea is that somebody's heart rate is going to come in the center there, and it's going to be a nice, big, fat, lazy blob. Now, occasionally you'll see it down here, and it looks like a fist, and it's very small, and that is the time when you need to watch out, because that person could be close to checking out. And the system, to me, is just absolutely shut down and going, just don't throw anything else at me, because I simply cannot cope. So, I said to you this can save lives. And just never assume the person in front of you is fine because they tell you they're fine. I've had some very, very big surprises from people, and they've been quite shocking. But these are the numbers that we really, really pay attention to. And if anybody who trains with us, we will take you through all of these things. So heart rate above 100 is at risk of a heart attack. SDNN above 100 is at risk of an infarction or cerebral. SDNN, so that is stress index, is under 10, you're at risk of a heart attack. CV, which was a percentage of your SDNN, above 15 or above, you are at risk of a stroke. And these things happen. And that's why whenever we get 2 or more of these numbers, we give the carnosine immediately with a glass of water to the person sitting in front of you, and we do not let them leave the chair. And I don't care how late the rest of my patients are for the next day, for the next, however many I'm seeing, because I just might be saving that person's life. Sorry, can you see?
Yeah.
If the index of centralization is below norm, think burnout and depression. The body is amazing. If you look at it in another way, the body hasn't got enough power. It can't run its resources. So what are we going to do? We're going to make you feel really awful. We're going to give you brain fog. We're going to just make you sit on a sofa and not do anything. You're going to call it depression. I'm going to call it a lack of power. And the body is protecting itself by not giving you the ability to move, by giving you those signals. But when the amount of people who come to me and go, I've got depression, and you put them on the carnosine, suddenly they're getting up and they're moving, because they now have the will to do so. And it's they like your rat study. Can't quite claim the same results as you have with your rat study, but they gave carnosine to a whole load of rats, and they measured the rats every 6 minutes on the wheel. And after a 2-month period of time, which was 6 months or 6 years in a rat's life, I believe, we had a 40% increase in desire to move and play. and nobody asked them to play on their treadmill or their wheel. They just had the urge to do it. And we see it a lot in people who are supposedly depressed. They just have a lack of power. Now, this is the one area that you will have difficulty with. If you've got people who are on depression drugs and they come on this, they will say to you after 2 months, oh, it's not working for me, nothing's happening. Well, they're medicated not to have any highs or lows, so why would they feel more joy in their lives, you know? So it's the one area that I sometimes struggle with. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell them to come off their drugs, but if in your position you are able to very slowly, incrementally bring down their depression drugs, then they have a much greater chance of getting out of that place, because on the numbers show they should be feeling a lot better and all the power and everything's coming up, but they can't feel it because they're medicated. So that's one area to watch out for. Stress index under 50 or over 1,000 is definitely at risk of a heart attack, and total power under 50 is also heart attack checkout zone. I've had people who've come in at 20, and they're so precious, and you can see, you know, the spectral function is just a line, there's nothing going on, and you can literally see there are no graphs. All of the graphics, have you had any of those, John? I don't know, yeah. So you see that all the pictures are just disappearing, and that person's checking out in front of you. And we have been able to change that prognosis for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, and it's very, very exciting. So basically, this is what we're looking at. This is a case that I was going to come on to at the end, but for those of you who haven't got one, this is what we've been going through. So I'm going to move on from this and talk about a couple of cases. So this is a lady who I will never ever forget. She came to me in her 70s. She was married to a London doctor, quite an eminent London doctor, and she came to see me for 18 months, and to this day he never knew she came to see me. Her atrial fibrillation was so appalling and had been for years that she knew she could check out at any time. She had the worst atrial fibrillation I'd ever seen at the time, and it scared me half to death. And she was told that the only options that were left open to her was for her to have her heart stopped and restarted again. And ironically, she had been in her day a cardiac nurse, and she said, there's no way they're going to do that to me, because I know it all goes back to square one in about 9 months' time. And she said, I don't know why you think you can do any different with your stuff. I've tried everything, and I'm married to a doctor. You ain't met Lilius yet. So she could barely walk up a flight of stairs. I mean, a normal flight of stairs, she would stop twice to get her breath back. I mean, she was so fragile. It was dreadful. And yeah, didn't believe for 1 minute. And I like people who don't believe anything's going to work, because they're my best cases when it does. This is what her chart looked like. Yeah. Oh. So, can you see? Do you want me to move? So this is really quite terrifying. So this is in the 90s. She's got SDNN of 137. She's got coefficient variation of 21. So heart attack, stroke, stress index of 24. Interestingly enough, her index of centralization hypothalamus is only 3.4. And she's got 9.3 arrhythmias. Remember, at 4%, we send people to see a cardiologist, so she's now got 9%. And she's supposedly got a total power of 19,000 odd. We shouldn't have more than 2,000. This is horrific. And I hadn't been doing this I'd been doing it for about a year, so I was scared seeing this. And she's at a 9, so you can see why this lady is in dire trouble. 8 weeks later, we have significant improvement. She's far less likely to have a heart attack. Her arrhythmias are down from 9.3 to 6.7, with 0.5 being the acceptable value. Look at this clumping. Can you see how that's changed from what it was before? I'll just go back to where it was before. So remember those images? So look at this and this. and she was over here, and then we're going to go to that. So in 8 weeks, you've got the scattergram showing you that things are a lot better, and she's gone from a 9 to a 7, which is massive, absolutely massive. So a year later, she can trot upstairs without being breathless, walk in the garden. Her arrhythmias are now consistently coming in around 3.5. Remember, at 4 we send people to a cardiologist. And her husband still has got no idea why her health has miraculously improved. And that's what she looked like a year later. So very, very exciting. I mean, she's still got some horrible numbers, but she's not going to check out anytime because of her AFib anytime soon. But I mean, for a 71-year-old lady, she's done an amazing job. So chronic fatigue. This is something that is one of the reasons my practice went bonkers. 51-year-old lady suffered all her life from chronic fatigue. Tragic, tragic case. Her and her sister were abducted and basically were at the mercy of some very nasty satanic abuse. And they literally spent a lifetime trying to resolve the emotional fallout from that. Her sister did not have the same constitution, sadly had died a year earlier. And, you know, like with a lot of the people who will come see you with chronic fatigue, they've tried everything. And we're talking years and thousands of dollars of trying. This is what she looked like. Now, remember I said to you at the beginning, if somebody comes in 1, 2, 3, in fact this is a 5, and they should be mildly stressed at 5, but she had a list this long of problems. So clearly the body was trying to do stuff, but it had no idea what was going on. So this is an absolute classic case of receptor damage. The body hasn't got a clue of the real stuff that's going on here. And so, you know, heart rate 74, we've got standard deviation coming in at 18, is that 18? Can't see on here, but it's very, very low. And she's got a total power of 333. This is a sixth of the power that she should have. So when you can see a ratio like this, people can't really multitask. They have to concentrate very hard. Her heart rate is in where it should be, but it's really struggling. It's like this. I want a big, fat, lazy blob. And when it's really tight, you know everything's under stress. She comes back 8 weeks later saying she has never felt better. She has no aches or pains and no brain fog. She just needed the power to heal. And that's what it looked like. Yeah. And this is why I get very passionate and very emotional and very excited about this, and this is why I want this in the hands of as many people as possible, because the amount of lives that you have the potential of changing quickly is huge. So yeah, very, very happy lady. This was a big one. So we had a lot of my practice is autism. So this boy had never spoken a word in his life. He'd never slept a full night in his life. So when I tell you, when these parents came to see me, I would stand behind the door, take a really deep breath, count to 3, and open the door. And what would walk through would be this hurricane of emotions of the parents. They've not slept, they're shouting at each other, the kid's traumatized, and it's kind of like, am I ready for this? Take a deep breath. And one can only have compassion, because when you've not slept for that long, they would take 4-hour shifts every night. And for 6 years, doing 4-hour shifts is intolerable. Everybody was completely traumatized. This is what the boy's chart looked like. And his power, interestingly, in his brain this is the one I always look at, was 10. He had 21% in the sympathetic here, cardiovascular respiration, and he's got 64 or 68% in his parasympathetic. So the boy's really trying, but if you adjust the numbers here, He's got about 700 odd power, not what's up there. He comes back to see me 3 months later, and again, it's like, okay, I know who my next patients are. And I open the door, and in walk two serene parents, and a little chap that goes, "Hi," and just walks past me, and I go, "What happened?" And they said he started sleeping within about 3 weeks, and after about 4 or 5 weeks he started trying to speak. And what most people don't realize is, although these kids can't speak, it's all up here. And he started making sentences, 3 or 4 word sentences, very quickly. He knew how, he just hadn't got the power to get it out. So those parents feel awful because they've been treating this kid like a 2.5-year-old that couldn't speak. But it was all in there, and the trauma that they go through. So I get very emotional about this. The trauma that they go through when they realize how that child's been treated, but they didn't know any better. And I see this a lot with parents where the kids start to speak, because they don't start with baby language, they are actually trying to form words immediately. And it's very, very powerful. But you can see here, you know, he's got 5.8 arrhythmias, all sorts of change. I'm sorry, I don't have his next chart here. It seems to have been omitted. But this is the stuff that can happen with this material. And this is why I like this, because you can see how much power have they got, where is it going, and what is it doing. And if you can see what it's doing, you can help them make the changes. Okay, this is a gentleman who we came across about a week, 10 days ago. He was at the A4M show in Orlando. He may be known to some of you, but he came on the stand towards the end of the day, and his results were such that we felt it necessary to give him some supplements immediately. He came to stand, he was not feeling very well at all. Now, I've never met anybody who's been hit with lightning. I certainly haven't met anybody who's had the misfortune of being hit twice. And this is what his test looked like. Yeah. So I am not a cardiologist, so I can't explain this, but my sense is that the electrical signals are probably completely messed up. I mean, this is extraordinary. I've never seen it like this ever. I have seen stuff like this, but I've never seen it like this. And he was in really, really bad order. So here, this is probably so low because there's so much AFib, there's not much to measure. We've got a standard deviation that is over 100 here. We've got his coefficient variation that's 76. Well, I'm sorry, this is over 1,000, I beg your pardon. This is over 1,000, it's 1,006. We don't want 69. Over 100 is the first number of, you could potentially have a heart attack. We're at 1,000. This is insane. Above 15, you're at risk of a stroke. He's coming in at 76. No wonder he felt awful. His stress index is 2. Below 10, you're at risk of a heart attack. So you can understand our slight concern towards the end of the day when this gentleman walked onto the stand. Ironically, his hypothalamus was pretty cruisy. So with all of this trouble going on, it's going, whatever. And I've never seen a number so big in all the years I've been doing this, which is about 729,568 was his total power. Well, that's complete and utter exhaustion, and the body's going, ah! And with the amount of numbers we'd knock off, if we adjust the numbers because the standard deviation is too high and the stress index is too low, that still brings it down to 7,000, which is still completely and utterly unacceptable. So, rightly so, Dr. Raja saw him the first time round, so we immediately said, here's some water, here's some supplements, take this and don't move, which is what we do with everybody in this situation. We sent him away with some supplements. We said, for heaven's sake, take them this evening, take them tomorrow morning, and if you'd like to, do come back onto the stand. So I saw him, I didn't know who he was. He said, hi, I'm I'm feeling a lot better than I was yesterday, and I'd really be interested to see what this magical stuff is doing to me. And he said, I'm the guy that's been hit by lightning. I went, oh, we've all been talking about you.
It took nine carnosines between when we tested the first time and this time. That was it. No other supplements, just 9 carnosine extras.
16 hours later. Don't really need to say anything, do I? So, remember his standard deviation was over 1,000. It's 58. Remember his stress index was 2. So this is now normal, this is now normal. But look at his index of centralization that was 1.2 going, whatever. It's now going, oh my goodness, we have got such a lot of work to do. And so suddenly it's now going, right, we're going to fix this, patch this, oil this, repair that. It's getting after it. And his total power is coming down to 2,800. It's a little higher than we would like it to be, but my goodness, it's a lot better than it was. And that is the power in 16 hours of what this stuff does. And if we didn't have such a sophisticated heart rate variability, we would not be able to see this. We would not be able to measure this. And if it wasn't for the power of the carnosine extra, as Dr. Raja likes to call it, our rock star peptide, we couldn't make these changes. So I hope that's been fun for you, enlightened you a little bit, and welcome to Mitochondrial Rescue.